Captain Carson Teva, a rotund and jolly guy who, in reality, was actually Santa Claus, or Santeva for short, was patrolling the galaxy in his T-65 X-Wing. He and Trapper Wolf were patrolling the Outer Rim when they were called by Garazeb Aurelios, who told them to return to the Aldefi base for a briefing. The commanding officers on the Aldefi base gave updates about what was going on in their various sectors, and eventually they were given their respective assignments. Santeva and Wolf were given a cookie crumb trail of information regarding some potential disturbances, with the most recent tip being near the Endor system. As they were leaving Aldefi, walking out of the meeting, Zeb mentioned to Santeva that he was going to a Gonkmas party that he was invited to, some Mandalorian out on Navarro, so he needed to go find a gift to bring to the party. Santeva and Trapper Wolf headed back to their T-65s to continue to investigate this cookie crumb trail, which led them to the Endor system. Since the Battle of Endor, the Model sector had been awfully quiet. That was until there were some signs of Imperial remnants. Santeva and Wolf found a suitable place to land through the trees and continued on foot, following the cookie crumb trail. They saw many remnants of broken down ships and pieces of the Death Star, the very space station where the legendary Luke Skywalker and his friends ended the war. It didn't take long before they found some suspicious looking structures attached to the trees, too modern of sorts. They climbed above the trees and above the buildings to get a better look. Carefully crawling on top of the building, they started to hear voices. A deep and commanding voice. A voice unmistakable by Santeva and Wolf. Moff Gideon. Which seemed to be impossible to them at first. But then Santeva had remembered that he read a report from Din Djarin where him and the rest of the Mandalorians had defeated Gideon back on Mandalore, but that Gideon had made a bunch of clones of himself. Listening closer, Santeva and Wolf discovered the true identity of this clone of Gideon to be none other than Moff Grinchian, a clone even more evil than the original Moff Gideon himself, with a heart 2 sizes too small. It is here that Santeva learns that Moff Grinchian and a company of evil Ewoks and snowtroopers plan to pull a heist off and steal all the presents from everyone at the Gonkmas party on Navarro. With this information in mind, they stealthily escape Grinchian's base and head back to their ships. As they were heading back, they noticed an old Imperial light cruiser on a landing pad not too far from where they had occurred, and figured it would not hurt to hide a tracking beam on it before they left. Meanwhile, on Navarro, Din Djarin and Din Grogu are setting up Clan Mudhorn's cabin to be suitable for guests. There were many friends and friends of friends coming to this party, so they both had a lot of work to do. Grogu was using his force powers to set up festive Gonkmas decorations, while Mando was working on preparing food for the guests. With such a large party, he had his hands full preparing the various courses. Thankfully, he had help from a special guest who had shown up extra early, a fellow Mandalorian, the now leader of Mandalore, Bo-Katan Kryze. Meanwhile, Santeva and Wolf had gotten into an intense dogfight as they were leaving the remote planet of Endor with some Imperial remnants TIE fighters that had noticed the T-65s and pursued them. Santeva ordered Trapper Wolf to follow him into an asteroid field of sorts that had remnants of the broken ships from the Battle of Endor in it, and it was in here where they carefully maneuvered around the debris and were able to take down the Imperial remnants TIE fighters. Just as they had defeated the TIE fighters, they noticed the tracking device they had placed was on the move. And then they saw in the distance the rustic Imperial light cruiser entering light speed. Santeva and Trapper Wolf primed the hyperdrives on their T-65 and prepared to make the jump. "We must stop Moff Grinchian if it's the last thing we do," Santeva said as they jumped to light speed. On Navarro, the Gonkmas party was in full effect. The party featured many guests, including Bo-Katan, Ahsoka Tano, Zeb, Hera Syndulla, Sabine, and little Jason Syndulla was also attending the Gonkmas party. Cobb Vanth was also there, and he had brought a friend. This mysterious friend was some great pilot of sorts, but everyone just called him Dan, apparently. Dan the pilot. Grief Karga, the magistrate of Navarro, was also there, and had brought children from the school to the party along with gifts for them. The gifts would not be opened until after they had their Gonkmas dinner. Grogu and the rest of the children could hardly hold back their excitement to receive their gifts. Jason and Grogu played games with the other kids from the Navarro school, Grogu, who had a tendency to get himself in trouble at times, had attempted to sneak into the back room where the Gonkmas tree, and this is where the gifts were being held. But Din Djarin caught Grogu in the act, trying to open his present early. No, Grogu! The Mandalorian had put Grogu in timeout time in his room. After many games and fun to be had, it was time for the Gonkmas dinner. Food was served outside the cabin buffet style. Din had felt bad that Grogu, who had set up most of the tables and decorations, was missing out, so he let him out of his room early to join back up with everyone. They enjoyed some Mos Eisley mash, blurgberry stuffing, bantha brisket, and a blue eggnog to wash it all down. It was a very merry time. Meanwhile, unbeknownst to the party, Moff Grinchian and his goonies showed up on Navarro. They had landed the light cruiser on the outskirts of town, so nobody would notice them. Upon landing, they traveled by way of a nefarious-looking sleigh, with 100 Imperial Porgs pulling the sleigh forward. Once they had arrived closer to the Gonkmas party by way of the Porg-powered sleigh, they started Phase 1 of their heist plan. They utilized the Ewok's small and cute stature to sneak through the back of the clan Mudhorde cabin, and they began taking presents from under the Gonkmas tree, one by one. They loaded up the Porg-powered sleigh with every present there was. Moff Grinchian instructed his snowtroopers to distract the Gonkmas party. They randomly showed up in front of the party outside where the feast was happening, dressed up in funny, festive costumes, such as Wampas and Tauntaun Riders. They played music and danced, and the guests of the party must have thought that this was part of the plan, as they just were enjoying the show. Din Djarin had noticed that everyone was enjoying this and decided to go along with it since everybody seemed happy. But in reality, they didn't realize what was happening behind them. Once all the gifts were loaded up in the Porg-powered sleigh, the evil Ewoks jumped in the sleigh with Moff Grinchian, and he ordered the 100 Porgs to return them back to the ship with all the presents. After the dinner finished, Jason, Syndulla, and Grogu headed to the Gonkmas tree, excited but only to find the tree empty. They informed the guests and everyone started to panic. Grinchian was laughing on the sleigh ride back. The mission was a success. Or was it? Just as Moff Grinchian was about to get to his ship and get away with all the presents, he noticed a T-65 X-Wing landing in front of him. A New Republic captain with a rotund frame and a beard white as snow got out, waiting for him at his ship. "This is as far as Moff Grinchian goes," Santeva said to Trapper Wolf, who had also just landed. "Return the presents or you will leave me no choice to put you under arrest," he had said to Moff Grinchian. "Never," Moff Grinchian said, and he started to make a break for it on his Porg-powered, Ewok-infested sleigh. Santeva got back in his T-65 and sped after him. Though the Porg-powered sleigh was fast, Santeva was faster. He pulled out in front of the sleigh, and the sleigh was forced to come to an abrupt stop. Moff Grinchian went flying out of his sleigh and landed on his face. Things were not looking good for Moff Grinchian. Santeva walked towards him, who was on the ground still, and Santeva had handcuffs in his hand. It appeared Moff Grinchian had finally given up and held out his hands, accepting defeat. Just as Santeva was about to cuff him, he did the unexpected. He dropped the handcuffs and embraced Grinchian with a rotund hug. In that moment, Grinchian's heart grew back to a normal size, some would say even larger than normal. Grinchian told Santeva that he would return the gifts to the Gonkmas party. The day was saved. Santeva, Wolf, and Grinchian returned with the presents for the kids. Din Djarin asked Santeva what reward he would like for saving the Gonkmas party. Santeva said he didn't want much, but some cookies and blue milk. Grinchian and the rest of his Ewok crew now joined in on the party. Grogu thought the Ewoks were funny, and him and Jason played a game with them and the rest of the Navarro children. After getting his fill of blue milk and cookies, Carson Teva and Trapper Wolf headed back to their T-65s and took off, looking for more cookie crumb trails and new ways to spread joy to the galaxy. Oh!